back in session. I recognize Senator Rodriguez on an amendment on Bill 231.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. My amendment is on page 11, line 15, and it's the first item. Patients under the medically indigent program. I'd like to add, and patients under other DPHSS income-based programs as approved by the Director of the Department of Public Health and Social Services. What this does, Madam Speaker, is, I'm sorry, I think it's page 10.
Okay, I was looking
Yes,
for
page
on
10
that,
of the
yeah.
bill.
Okay.
What this does is allow for other individuals that are not part of the MIP to also be able to take advantage of the benefits of, if it's through Azuda or through any other nonprofit in the future that would be able to help them travel off island for medical services. And so I ask my colleagues to please support this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Let me see if I understand this correctly. Then on page 10, am I on the wrong bill somehow? Page 10, yes. Line 16 okay, there's so, all right, so after program, then you add the words and patients under other DPHSS income-based programs as approved. Okay. On the amendment, is there anyone who'd like to speak on it? There being none and not hearing any objections, okay, the amendment passes. You still have the floor, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And also on line 23, I'd like to add after the medically indigent program, the same language and patients under other DPHSS income-based programs. Then, what this does is also allow, just like we did with item 1, is allow our other residents who are not part of MIP but other income-based programs within public health to take advantage of the benefits of this program.
On the amendment, no objections, so ordered. Is there anybody else? I understand Senator Guthers wanted to provide an amendment, but I'm going to go ahead and come back to her. So oh, you do? Okay, and you're going to present it for her? Okay. Senator Barnes, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. On behalf of the good senator from Manila or Barragata, I'd like to go ahead and proffer the amendment for her.
Is it how many lines? Because I don't see it.
It's 2.
2 lines?
I mean, it's item number 1 and item number 2.
On the same page?
Yes, it's
So
to
it's
replace.
Not that long?
No.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and turn it in to the clerks, Madam Speaker. If you just please allow me to read it for her. It says, number 1, to replace Azuda Foundation throughout the bill with nonprofit mileage agency.
And
And then
on
number
what
2,
page?
add the following to
What
section.
page? Can you tell us, please?
It will start on page.
Oh, throughout the bill
Yes.
then? So every place where it says Ajuda Foundation, you are going to replace it with nonprofit.
With nonprofit mileage agency.
Nonprofit mileage agency.
And then on page 9,
And page 9.
which is the item number 2, to add the following to section 23112 definitions. And it would read, nonprofit mileage agency shall mean Azuda Foundation or any other nonprofit organization approved by the DOA which is able to receive transfers of government employee travel mileage into its account without a transfer fee, and also able to use the mileage for eligible patients without a fee in accordance with this act. So DOA would mean the Department of Administration.
Okay. If there's anyone that wants to speak on it, it's important that they have then a copy of the amendment. Do you have that copy, Senator? Can you share that then at least with her so that she'll be able to speak on it? On both, you can speak on both, otherwise I'm going to separate them, vote on it separately. Yes, so the very, okay, let's, Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, if I follow what the amendment is proffering, I don't think it'll be consistent or it'll fit in page 2, line 3.
Page 2, line 3.
That whole
Madam
sentence
Speaker,
there
can we
needs
just
to
take a
be
30
written.
second recess,
I
please?
we'll take a brief
To
recess.
do technical
Okay, 53 seconds. Is back in session. Senator, you still have the floor.
Madam Speaker, as we look at the amendment more carefully, I do know that there are some technical provisions that may need to take place on that amendment. So if I may, on behalf of the author, I'd like to go ahead and withdraw that for the time being, and maybe we can come back before the bill gets taken down and maybe just bookmark that for that possible amendment, if I may, but I will withdraw that amendment at this time.
Any objections? No objections, so ordered. It's withdrawn, the amendment, yes. And if we're still, so that means, well, are we going to, is it the pleasure of the body then to dispense discussion?
I need to
Senator Blas, you're
thank you,
recognized.
Madam Speaker. In the interest of full disclosure, I have to submit that I'm a board member of the Azuda Foundation.
No worries.
Okay. So all you have to do is submit a letter
Yes,
to the
and
Speaker's office.
that's
Yes.
being prepared as we speak, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Are there any other speakers on the bill 231? I'm going to call on the author then to close.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleagues for their kind consideration of this proposal. I definitely think that, we have a system that is capturing a little bit. This will allow us to capture more, and if not all. And it will also allow us to help and service our individuals who have this need. It also not only goes to the patient. When we refer an island or a patient off island, we can't always think there's a patient, but almost always there's a companion that they need to go with somebody else who is with them to provide them care and comfort while they're there. And this also helps in those situations. When it's a medevac, it helps in that the doctor can be accompanied. I know, Madam Speaker, at one time, I had the fortune of surviving a medical evacuation off this island, and I had to pay for the doctor as well as myself and my family to go. And we were fortunate in that we had some assistance through our insurance, but it was still a huge burden on the family. And I think that for a group of patients, we're going to be able to provide them relief from this government without it costing us anything. And that's the key here, is that this will help our people, and it's not going to cost the government money. It's envisioned by Senator, the good doctor, Edward Cruz, who saw and was on many of these medical evacuation trips. And I know that I talked to him, and I know that on a couple of instances, because of the people he was dealing with, I know that he paid for his own ticket, and I accompanied the patient off island because that's what it took, and that's what he felt he needed to do as a doctor and as a humanitarian. And I think it is fitting and that we recognize him for his vision in this, and that we do all we can to make sure that it works, and we continue to work with it and refine it. So I thank everyone for their kind and generous consideration. Thank you, and Sidus Mausi.
On the motion to send Bill 231 to the voting file without any objections, so ordered. Substitute Bill number 234-31, COR, and I recognize the author, Senator Mabini.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move Substitute Bill 234-31 to the third reading file.
Would you like to discuss it?
Yes, and I'd like to briefly discuss the bill.
It's as substituted.
Yes,
Yes.
as substituted. When I first joined the legislature, one of these topics kept coming back, and these certain topics kept coming back, and one of them had to do with issues regarding protecting our environment. And members from Department of Agriculture, EPA, had brought this issue about clearing grading during construction efforts. So basically, this bill stems from various public roundtable meetings that have involved our community members and U.S. and local Department of Agriculture. Now, I understand that we've received various testimonies, including the director from Department of Agriculture, the director of Guam EPA, as well as the director of DPW. And fortunately, this bill has received their support. In fact, the administrator of Guam EPA had noted that this bill would provide the quote-unquote official inclusion to strengthen the regulating roles of the Department of Agriculture. Because as of right now, currently, the role that Department of Agriculture has been at the discretion of whoever's sitting at the permit area. So the impact would generally be protecting our flora, our fauna, our wetlands, and our endangered species. And of course, the residual benefits would be protecting our reefs as well as our ocean. And so basically, it gives everybody the opportunity it gives the Department of Agriculture the opportunity to review all applications. Now, I understand that the Department of Public Works also has in works the development of a more efficient system at their one-stop center, what they call the state-of-the-art signing process, and they are willing to include Department of Agriculture in this process. And as far as a comment that was received, as far as does this add more bureaucracy, in actuality, as I mentioned earlier, this is already going on. What we're doing is we're just formalizing the process. And more importantly, it begins addressing what was brought up when we were reviewing, when our island was dealing with the FEIS and DEIS. So by including this agency, we're now just kind of closing that circle. Not all permits will require inspection, of course, but this actually will be we're strengthening our current laws. And I ask that my colleagues support Bill 23431, which essentially includes Department of Agriculture in reviewing the permit process when it comes specifically to clearing and grading. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would ask if we could move this to the voting file.
On the motion, are there any, Speaker Pangilinan and then Senator Munya Barnes?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just want to make one simple amendment, and that would be on line 24 of page 2. I would just strike out, I move to strike out Guam Telephone
I
Authority.
was going to ask about that. Okay, very good. Yeah.
Page 2?
On the motion then on
Line
page
24.
2, line 24, to delete Guam Telephone Authority
Right.
because it's not an
It's
autonomous
already,
agency.
this is the, from the existing statute, and
Yes.
that's already been
Okay.
privatized.
So it'll be to strike, do a strike through, not to delete, but rather just to do a strike through that it's not going to be a part of, because this is existing legislation. Yeah. So on the amendment then to do a strike through in page 2, line 24 of Guam Telephone Authority, without any objections, are we still discussing? Would you like to discuss it with the chair? On the mic. No, I'm waiting to call for the vote, but you were talking, so that's why. So on the, no objections then to the amendment? So ordered. Senator Munya Barnes, you're recognized.
Si Diyos Mahasi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I really don't have any objections to this bill. I do support the intent of this bill and thank the author for including the agency in. My only well, probably, I don't know if it's a concern, but I guess one would think that if we were to add another agency for clearing, one would ask, what about a timeline? And are we adding more bureaucracy to what processes are already being done within the government of Guam? So I'd like to ask the author, if I may, was it brought up? I do apologize, I wasn't there at the public hearing. And the intent of I know that this probably will be included in the one-stop concept approach, but what would that timeline be if Department of Agriculture were included? Would there be any timelines that Department of Agriculture would have to work and approve on this permit? Because if there was one concerns that go out from anywhere, from the constituents to the agencies or agencies to the constituents, was the timeline. So that would be my question to
Senator,
the author.
do you yield to the question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Madam Speaker. Yes, thank you. That was a concern, of course. No, we don't want any more bureaucracy than we have. However, what was mentioned was one that this is already in existence. As far as they usually at the discretion of whoever is approving the permits, usually goes to the Department of Agriculture. The bureaucratic issue has to do with the timeline, and with the testimonies from Department of Agriculture, Deputy Director and Director, that they would be setting up their strict timelines so that there's no excessive or additional delays than necessary. But they would have to be able to set up that process, and maybe not necessarily here in this legislation.
Okay, so they would in terms of rules and regulations be able to set up that timeline, whether it be 5 days, 10 days, or no more than 15 days. Right. And Madam Speaker, that was my only concern, was making sure that the timeline from application to processing to getting the constituent or the agency its answer, that it won't be further boggled down in more red tape or waiting time. And that was my only concern. And if she says that the agency will work with the implementation of what's already in with the one-stop center, then I have no objection. And I rise in support of the bill. Sizos Masi.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Munya Barnes. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on the motion for Bill 234? None. Senator Mabini, would you like to close, or you want to send it down?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the support of my colleagues. Again, although there's always that concern of that additional bureaucracy, in the long run, this would really benefit and save costs, as we have seen in during the FEIS and DEIS, that our community is extremely concerned about construction, especially when it comes to clearing and grading. And this would help alleviate potential future costs to our community by just a few days of just inspecting. And I thank my colleagues for their support of Bill 234-31. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome. On the motion then to send Bill 234, oh, no, over there, way down there, so I keep asking. We want timeout? Okay, so 54 seconds. Recess. Senator Mabini, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I apologize. I'm requesting if we can delay the deliberation for further analysis of some of the contents, and if we could move this to the bottom of the second reading file.
With
Notwithstanding. Thank you. Is that right?
No, actually, what we'll do is that we will discontinue then the discussion, and you're right.
To suspend the
You're right,
discussion.
and then we'll come back to it without
Yes.
you moving. We'll just continue on, and then no, it will stay. It will
It's
stay
still in
its
second.
place.
We just
it
move it
won't
down.
lose its place. We're only going to suspend the discussion until we're ready to get back to it.
Okay.
Without any objections, then. Is it very clear? We're not moving it down. We will stay in its place.
Just
We're going to
suspending.
suspend discussion until we're ready to pick it up again. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Very good. So on that amendment without any objections, so ordered. Thank you. On substitute bill number 240-31 COR, I recognize the author, Senator Yamashita.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I ask that we move Bill number 240-31 as substituted by the Committee on Youth, Cultural Affairs, Procurement, General Government Operations, and Public Broadcasting to the third reading file, and I ask to be able to speak on it.
Yes, Senator, you may continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill number 240-31 addresses current Guam Code annotated in Chapter 8, which really addresses the arts on our island. Those particular chapters were molded and brought to life by Senator Carmen Casperbar, Senator Elizabeth Arreola, and our current Congresswoman Madeline Berdalio. As they in the legislatures had seen the need to grow our arts, the need to foster culture, the need to ensure that our people's traditions are kept throughout the buildings. And it was quite visionary in that as our island's economy developed and boomed, they saw that as the investments are made, then there is a way to ensure that whomever is building will ensure that our history is brought to life. Most certainly when we land and we take off at the AB Wampat Guam International Airport, we see that. Yes. It was one of the very first structures that applied this law. We see that at various hotels who paid attention to this law. The courts have done that as well. The Guam Department of Mental Health has done that. And of most recent, the new school or the new college of Business and Public Administration at the University of Guam has done that as well. But interestingly enough, for some reason, or one reason or another, the law has become pretty silent in that it hasn't been addressed, implemented, respected, or honored. And as we spend very much time remembering, honoring, supporting, fundraising, lots of fundraising, for a lot of our different civic groups, as you and I, Madam Speaker, talk to a lot of student groups, at all levels, and always they ask, where can we get more support for the arts and the culture? As we thought more about that, we thought certainly there are laws on our books that are not being honored, are not being addressed as best as they could. And so this bill looks at that, Chapter 8 GCA, and says that we want to expand the options to support the arts. The current law states that the buildings which have received federal or Government of Guam tax incentives or other subsidy arrangement funds, such as our QCs, for construction must set aside 1% for the purchase of local artwork. And for quite a while there, it was active. CAHA was on it. They have their rules and regs. They always had their judges. During our public hearing, as a matter of fact, we had many of the artists in the public hearing room, and it was almost a very nice coming together. It was welcoming home, and they were all looking at each other and remembering those years. And this measure will allow the developers or building owners to choose to reserve the 1% for artwork or to allocate it to the Guam CAHA, whom I am proffering will administer the funds to support art. The idea is, as we look, and as somebody is building for anything that's over $100,000, this law already is on the books. We're just not paying attention to it. I would like us to say, as a policy body, that you have to follow the law. And as we talk to CAHA, as we talk to the Department of Public Works, the Madam Director there, and her deputy, as we talk to Tugita, that whole administration, everyone understands that this is a law that if we did breathe life into it, it can generate monies for the arts. Whether it is that they have to put the art up on the walls, or if this bill passes, and I really do hope that it does, that this amount of monies can be given to CAHA, and then CAHA will adjudicate rules and regs to decide where this money will go. Starting at the beginning with our young children, I talk to artists in the community who spend Saturdays tutoring at Epal Beach or to different beaches. They say that there's always a need to grow the arts. We have many mayors who have different village projects, but oftentimes the question is, where can we get funding support for the supplies, for the materials for funding support? And I think that this is a way to say to the people who are building into our land, rooting their concrete, their rebar into our land, to say, You can do that. You follow our rules and regulations, and as you do that, you help us grow our arts. Because I maintain one more time that a very natural intelligence of the Guam people is art. We are so gifted in singing, in dancing, in poetry, in storytelling. And I really think that if we invested more in that, many of our social emotional problems would be lessened. I think if we invest more into the arts, more and more of us will graduate from high school. More and more of us will start up small businesses that will grow the arts. And so this is amending current law. This is saying that we want to, and interestingly, perhaps two bills ago, there was a little side conversation about retrospective, about going back and collecting monies on airline tickets, or miles on airline tickets. And in this bill, we did proffer an amendment that says we would want GITA, and they've agreed that they could do this, to do an assessment of anybody who has had a qualifying certificate who did not give 1% for the arts. And to go back and say to those folks, you have a year to find out how you're going to invest 1% of the monies that you've given into this economy, to give it to CAHA for this fund. And the CAHA board, they're well aware that they would have to go through the whole adjudication process to set up those rules and regs for that 1% for the programs. But currently the 1% rules and regs for the arts on the walls are already adjudicated. It's just that they have been asleep for about 6 years now. And so, Madam Speaker, I ask my colleagues here to really think about it. We had some very healthy conversations. I know there are some concerns with the mandating, with the shalls in here. I'm very open to the conversation. I thank gratefully Vice Speaker's staff, in particular Chris, who was very helpful in massaging and molding the language, which makes sense. But it's current legislation. 1% shall go to the captivating, to the growing of our arts. And this Bill 240, will say that they have to do that. We have to adhere to the law. If you're not going to put it up on the walls, then 1% of your construction costs shall go to a CAHA account, of which CAHA will then administer. I ask my colleagues to think about it, and I look forward to the dialogue. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome. On the motion, are there any other speakers? Would you like them to send it down to the...
Thank you very much. I thank everybody so very much for the support. I ask that we send it down to the voting file. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the motion to send it to the voting file without any objections, so ordered. Bill number 242, that's 31. I recognize Senator Tom Ada.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that Bill 242-31 COR be placed in third reading, and I would like to discuss it.
So there's no substitute, right? Okay.
No.
As introduced.
As
Okay.
introduced.
You may proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 242 actually provides an update to the existing statutes regarding the eligibility requirements for selection of an individual to serve as the Adjutant General for the Guam National Guard. Now, the Adjutant General is actually a GovGuam director's position. And the current law requires that the individuals who may be considered for that position must meet certain requirements, such as, for example, the individual must hold the rank of Colonel, Colonel 06, and must have federal recognition right now. Now, if we kind of take a look at the National Guard, in the past 17 years, the National Guard has been commanded by two individuals. During the Gutierrez administration, it was General Benny Paulino, who was the Adjutant General. He had just come off active duty. He had retired He was picked up. He came in just as a new administration was coming in. He was selected to be the Adjutant General, met all the necessary eligibility requirements, and stayed on with that administration. When the Gutierrez administration left, the Camacho administration picked up General Goldhorn, who came out of retirement, and selected him to be the Adjutant General. He stayed in that position for another 8 years. And then when the Camacho administration expired, the new administration under Calvo again picked up General Benny Paulino to once again take over the helm. So what Bill 242 wants to do is actually try to expand the pool of eligibles that the governor might be able to select from. So right now, the law requires that the governor can only select from those individuals who hold the rank of Colonel 06. However, right on the fringe of that are those individuals who hold the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, an 05. However, those individuals, there are individuals who have already met, for example, the time and service requirements, the time and grade requirements, have met all the military academic requirements, and have already actually gone before a military board and has been selected for promotion to the next higher rank of Colonel 06. The only reason why he hasn't pinned on the Eagle is they're just waiting for a position to become vacated before he moves into that, or it may be that the selection board, having selected him, said this promotion will become effective, let's say, 3 months from now. So what the bill does is then it allows the governor, it makes those lieutenant colonel promotables eligible to be considered for selection as the adjutant general. So it expands the pool. Now, it's important to expand the pool because although you may have, like for example, if you went up to the National Guard right now, they probably got about 6, 7 colonels who are currently serving full time. You go to the Army Reserve or the Air Force Reserve, you may find maybe 1 or 2 colonels who are part-timers. The guys who are up at the National Guard who are serving full-time are earning about $110,000 a year. That's just base salary. That's not including your other allowances that come with that. So these guys are not going to just about, retire out now so that they can be selected to put on a star and move into a position that pays only $70,000. Many of these guys will go for as long as they can, and then after that, they're probably saying, okay, that's it. I'm going to go on and move on to other things. The individuals who are with the Army Reserves who are part-timers, they are part-timers. They only come in that 1 weekend a month, but they have full-time careers. And more often than not, many of these individuals are holding senior positions out in the private sector. So again, they're probably not going to give that up, which is probably paying quite well, to move into a $70,000 a year position. So as a result, we need to expand the pool. So that's why then the bill proposes to include in the pool of eligibles those individuals who are in the grade of Lieutenant Colonel 05 promotable. Now, the other thing that our current law requires is that the Adjutant General must have federal recognition. Well, a very good example with the previous Adjutant General, General Goldhorn, Army regulation or National Guard federal regulations actually require that a general officer, once he reaches 66 years old, must be mandatorily retired. That's it. You hang up your spurs and they take away that federal recognition. Guam law requires that the Adjutant General must have federal recognition. Well, we found in research that, for example, 43 states were scanned. We reviewed the requirements in 43 states. 43 states, in 12 of the states, there's no requirement for federal recognition. 8 states have no requirement for continued federal recognition after an initial appointment. So normally what you would find is your younger colonels will already have federal recognition. That's normally one of the requirements when you get promoted to the senior field grade ranks. Well, in 8 of the states, they require that at the front end, when you first get appointed, you must have that federal recognition. But after that, I think it's in New York, there's a guy that, Adjutant General, has been there for like 20 years. He's, I think, pushing 80. But the state has chosen to keep him as the Adjutant General. The federal regulation says, fine, if that's what you want, but federal recognition's got to be taken away. Then, in 2 of the states have laws which vote in, which the tags are actually voted in. 3 states, state laws mandatorily retire the tag, and that's the choice of the state to retire their tags at the age of 64 years old. And 22 states do require federal recognition for the tenure of the tag. Interestingly enough, 2 states with the largest National Guard units, California and New York, do not require federal recognition at all. So what the Bill 242 does then is it really does not require the tag to have federal recognition. And so what this effectively does, again, if we take the example of the previous Adjutant General, General Goldhorn, he reached the age of 66, I believe about 4 months before the expiration of the Camacho administration. So what effectively that would have done, it would have left the National Guard without an Adjutant General. So in this case, what they did was they went to the National Guard Bureau and they got a special waiver and allowed him to stay on for the duration of the Camacho administration. So come January 4th, that's it. He's out. And after that, he can't go on. So I believe the current tag, I don't think he turns 66 until, I think he's still got quite a ways to go. But, you know, it's almost saying that once you turn 66 and the federal government, the federal regulations require that the federal recognition be withdrawn, that all of a sudden he is now ineffective by virtue of having turned 66. So by removing that requirement for federal recognition from the law, from Guam law, then that Adjutant General is really able to serve out his term concurrent with the term of the administration that he is working for. Again, the National Guard Bureau pretty much leaves it to the state to decide whether they require their Adjutant General to be federally recognized. I think the only requirement they have is that that individual must have been a commissioned officer at one time. So, Madam Speaker, I ask that my colleagues support this bill, and contrary to you know, some of the feedback on this is that we are lowering the standards for the Adjutant General, and that is not the case at all. In the case of now expanding the pool to allow the Lieutenant Colonel promotable, really, for all intents and purposes, he still holds the rank of Lieutenant Colonel promotable only because we're waiting for just a matter of time, but he has met all the requirements. And then On the other end of it, the adjutant general should be allowed to continue serving at least for the remainder of the term of the administration that he is in. So hopefully by making these changes, the governor will then be able to really have a slightly larger, I mean, this is not going to now open up the pool of eligibles that now he's got, more candidates than he can shake a stick at. It's probably going to add maybe one or two more candidates that could be considered and hopefully would be interested to occupy this position. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
On the motion, Senator Frank Blush, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I support the intent of the legislation, and I appreciate and I applaud and commend the good author of a legislation that would help to expand the pool. Our current force structure on Guam, both in the Army Reserve and the National Guard, does contain a number of very capable individuals, promotable and otherwise, that can serve in the capacity. I just have a question with regards, and the author of the legislation can yield the question, and this is in regards to page 3, subsection B, where it says, and shall serve only as federally recognized in such grade. My concern here is if if it is no longer federally recognized, my concern is then how would that work in as far as if the tag is then is under Title 10 status, or can he be under Title 10 status? Title 10 status basically, Madam Speaker, so that you can understand this, is now he's assuming the federal role. And his commander-in-chief is now actually the President of the United States, not necessarily the Governor of Guam. But as the Adjutant General, if he's not federally recognized, does that affect the Title 10 status of that officer, here in this case the tag?
Senator, do you yield to the question?
Yes, Madam Speaker. First of all, the position of the Adjutant General is a Gov Guam position. It is not a Title 10 position. So take, for example, the current Adjutant General. 28 days out of the year, his pay is a Gov Guam salary. And then during the 2 days of the month when they perform the drill, then he receives federal compensation. In the case of the current Adjutant General, he's actually a retired officer. So, all he does is then during those 2 days, they suspend his retirement pay, and they substitute it with another form of federal payment. So it's a net gain of 0 for him. But unfortunately, this position, and that's why many of your current full-time colonels are not rushing to fill this position, because it's not a full-time Title 10 that pays at the rate of $100,000+ a year.
Senators, did he answer your question?
Actually, my question is with regards to if, and this is the case, this is in the case of assuming that we have a tag that reaches the maximum of 66 years. And after that, and if this legislation were to pass, he would still be, of course, locally recognized as the tag. But my concern is, past that 66 years, and if that individual is still there, should a national incident occur, which requires for a Title 10 activation, how would this affect that current commanding officer of, in this case, the National Guard? Will he have the ability to be recognized to be able to continue to lead his troops under Title 10 status if he's not federally recognized?
Senator Ada, do you yield to the question?
Yes, Madam Speaker. I think in that case, what would happen is then when they get federalized, when the National Guard gets federalized, the units here then actually get attached to a active Army unit who has its own commander, and really the tag almost becomes really a bystander at that time. But during peacetime, you know, he is the commander of that unit.
Can I take a 1-minute recess?
We're going to take a minute recess. The legislature is back in session. Senator Blas, you still have the floor. Senator Frank Blas, you still have the floor. Oh, oh. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on the motion? I don't want to miss anybody. Looks like, do you need more time? I'm going to give you 23 seconds.
Legislature's back in session. We did leave off with
Oh, I'll go.
Senator Frank Blas. Bro, you're done? Okay. Are there anyone else wishing to speak? If not, I'll address Senator Tom Atta on 242.
Was there any other speaker?
Are there any other wishing to speak on the main motion? If not, Senator Atta.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, I just urge my colleagues to favorably consider this bill in that for three reasons. One, it expands the pool of eligibles that the governor might be able to select from for the Adjutant General position. Secondly, it allows the Adjutant General, by removing that federal recognition requirement for the Adjutant General, after being initially appointed, it removes that requirement, which then allows that Adjutant General to serve out that entire tenure along with the administration that appointed that individual. And really, those are the two things that that Bill 242 does. And thirdly, rest assured that the amendments that Bill 242 brings to the existing statute does not in any way reduce the standards for selection as the Adjutant General. Thank you.
So you'd like to move it?
I'd like to move Bill 242 down to the voting file. Thank you.
Without any objection, motion carries. We do understand that we did suspend discussion on Senator Mabini, but I understand that we've come to some kind of resolution. So Senator Sam Mabini, we're back on your bill, 234.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After review with council, looks like the text within the bill number 234 and 31, as far as meeting the intent of the bill, is all right, is fine. There is one minor technical correction, and that's just on page 1 and the title. Second line, it should say Chapter 66, not Chapter 26.
So it would be Chapter 6?
Chapter 66.
Chapter 66.
Yes.
So delete 2 and add the 6. On
Yes.
that motion, without any objection, motion carries.
Thank
Would
you,
like to
Madam.
move the
Yes,
bill
and I'd like to move Bill 234-31 to the
to
voting
the voting
file.
file?
Thank
Are
you,
there any
Madam Speaker.
objections? No objections. Motion carries. We are now on bill number 243, and I invite the authors, Vice Speaker Cruz, to speak on the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move Bill 243-31 to the third reading file, and I'd ask for a small opportunity to address the body.
There were no amendments, right? No, as introduced.
As introduced.
Please proceed, Vice Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I know that in an effort to try to save the forest, many of you have not received a copy of the committee report, and if you don't have the Wi-Fi capability to be able to pull down the report, I'd like to just read page 2 and 3 of the letter from the Department of Land Management into the record so everybody understands. And this is from Mr. Carlos Santillan, the Acting Director of Land Management. Surrounding land uses. Current land uses surrounding the subject lot consist of both multi-family, single-family residential development with commercial and light industrial uses, activities occurring within 500 feet of the subject property. Adjacent and east of the subject lot is Lot 7-1, Block 2, Track 148, which was rezoned from A, rural agricultural, to M1, light industrial, in 1997 for the purpose of a car repair and body shop operation. Other TLUC rezoning actions to M1 were on Lot 7-1 and Lot 8, Block 1, Track 148. The headquarters for Yama Tour Bus Services is located on these lots. For those of you that have a copy of the map, I mean, it's on Bellow Road, so you'll know where this is next to Yama's. The immediate area is not new to legislative action for rezoning. Other M1 rezoning actions were made on lots 5224-7-1 through 5224-7-3 under Public Laws 2155 and 2216. Also, various lots towards the east terminus of Bellow Road were also rezoned to M1 as well via legislative action. Assessment and recommendation. Notwithstanding its conditional permit, Lot 6, Block 2, Track 148 fringes on that small bastion of remaining rural lots in the immediate area. The area still maintains single and multifamily residences that have coexisted with the peripheral and external effects of light industrial activities for over 20 years. In deriving the assessment of the proposed legislation, we consider the potential effects such action will have on public necessity, convenience, and general welfare. The justifications under these criteria were based on the fact that 1, all utility infrastructure available, water, power, public sewer, and roads. 2nd, past land use actions have occurred to the extent that commercial or light industrial uses appears to be the dominant land use in the immediate area. 3rd, the proposed land use zone and land use development is the highest and best use for this area, since the permitted use of a zone such as agricultural is not viable use in the area as assessed by the Department of Agriculture. More critical is that the area is overshadowed by the air installation compatibility use zone. It's flight path of the airport, having accident potential zone APZ factor of 1. The fact that the area's APZ1 zone requires a shift from residence to commercial or industrial uses, notwithstanding the fact that residential uses are permitted in the current zone. The surrounding parcels have also been zoned to light industrial, and industrial activities have been in operation, have not been a detriment to other current residential competing commercial and industrial zones. If rezoned to light industrial, such zoning designation would appear to have the least impact on the health, safety, and general welfare that would be more pronounced should a residential community exist. The proposed zoning to light industrial is a more prudent zone designation for this area. For the reasons cited above in preceding paragraphs, we support the rezoning of the subject zone from A to M1. I hope that sufficiently is clear that because this is within the flight path, that it's APZ1, and that land management considers light industrial to be the best use for this area. I hope that I get the support of my colleagues in approving this, since it is the recommendation of land management.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Anyone else wanting to speak on this? If not, Mr. Vice Speaker, if I may, just on the caption, if we can look at amending the word TRACK to TRACT, tract. On that motion from the Vice Speaker, because it's tract, not track. No objections. Motion carries. Anyone else wish move to the third vote, the voting file, please?
Thank you. I move to the voting file. Thank you.
Thank you. Without any objection, motion carries. We are now on Bill number 245-31. Again, I address the Vice Speaker and invite him to speak on Bill 245.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move Bill 245 to the third reading
As
file and ask
substituted.
for an opportunity.
As
I'm not-
substituted. It was substituted.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 245 as substituted by the Committee on Rules, Federal Foreign Affairs, Micronesian, and Human and Natural Resources.
And you can proceed to speak.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, this is a very simple amendment to current statute. We are proposing to add to the section which currently exists that already prohibits non-immigrant temporary workers from participating in the recruitment, selection, of personnel, to also to expand not only participate but in making any determination
as to the recruitment selection, and also just throughout the area section, partaking in any other activity involving or making determination concerning this activity. So it's just an amendment to the law. And then we add a completely new subsection 1 to allow Department of Labor to determine what kind of penalty shall be assessed in the event that they find that someone has violated this. Madam Speaker, you'll note that I have 4 bills all related to H-2 laborers coming up. This is just the first. And one, we had received word that H-2 laborers were participating in decision-making, and all we wanted to do is make sure that the decision is made by people who have a vested interest locally, and there's not a major conflict in trying to make a determination as to whether or not they're going to continue to bring them in by having someone who is brought in on an H-2 visa to also participate in the determination of whether or not more should be brought. So I hope I get the support of my colleagues for this one.
Cesar Masi, Vice Speaker Cruz. Anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? If not, Vice Speaker, would you like to bring it down to the voting file?
Just if it be moved to the voting file, please.
Are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. Vice Speaker, I'll go ahead and recognize you again on Bill 246.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Again, I'd like to move Bill 246-31 as substituted by the Committee on Rules, Federal, Foreign, and Micronesian Affairs to the third reading file, and ask for an opportunity to address.
As substituted, yes, please proceed.
Madam Speaker, the law currently requires that in order to be able to bring H-2 alien laborers in, that you just have to publish in the newspaper once. No, actually, I'm sorry. It's 3 consecutive days in the paper, but except for those of us that actually buy the paper for the specific purpose of looking for these ads, I don't know who else is spending $1 to buy the newspaper. And if you try to get it online, you probably won't find these, the job applications, especially the temporary notifications. And also, Madam Speaker, we are currently suffering at least a 13.3 unemployment rate on island. And I have been trying very hard to get Department of Labor and the administration to do something about trying to assist in making sure that before we invite H-2 laborers in, that we try every possible conceivable way of of making sure that our local unemployed workforce, our unemployed individuals on our island are employed. And because 13.3 is just way too high. I mean, the President of the United States is getting killed with a 9.1 unemployment rate, and we're at 13.3, and there doesn't seem to be much in my asking Department of Labor or the governor to make sure that before they certify any of the H-2 applications that the kids that graduate from GCC or from the Trades Academy are employed before it's done. And so what this amendment does in Bill 246 is it adds a requirement besides publishing it in the newspaper. It requires that the job announcements be provided to the mayor's offices so that the mayor's offices, they are the ones that in the villages that know who all is unemployed and is looking for a job, who is able to do whatever, if it's landscaping or it's some other jobs. And Madam Speaker, the most troubling thing is that I know Senator Ben and I got into he got into a fairly contentious debate with our Congresswoman at the Denver Convention when Congressman Abercrombie was talking to the caucus, because he asked our Congresswoman why it was that she was expanding the authorization to bring in all these H-2 laborers when we have a huge unemployment rate. And Mr. Abercrombie promised us at that point that he was going to do something about it, but unfortunately his efforts weren't successful. So we have this problem currently And if you've been following the newspapers, we've been getting requests for certification for specialty cooks to cook Filipino and American food. We have GCC and one of the other high schools have won culinary awards throughout the country in competition, and we're trying to bring in specialty cooks. They've been public relations specialists, graphic artists, bakers, landscapers, floral designers, air conditioning and refrigeration mechanics. I mean, the list goes on. It's unbelievable. But I keep thinking that if the mayors are provided with a list of any of these applications for H-2 laborers, they will know that, you know, Joe down the street has been doing automotive services and is currently unemployed and would be able to recommend that he go down and apply for the position. So I'm hoping that my colleagues will support me in Bill 246, just amending the law to electronically transmit the announcements to all the mayor's offices so that they could post it in the villages, and more importantly, would be able to assist in singling out people within their village to come in and apply for those positions. Hopefully, we'll be able to get the unemployment rate down, Madam Speaker, and so I ask for the support of my colleagues in this very simple amendment to the law.
On the motion, anyone else wishing to speak? If not, Vice Speaker, you want to go ahead and bring it down? On the
Thank you,
voting-
Madam Speaker. I'd like to move it to the voting file.
Without any objection, motion carries. Thank you, Vice Speaker. We do have up next is Bill number 252-31, COR, and I will acknowledge Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move Bill 252-31 to the third reading and be allowed to discuss the legislation.
You may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill 252-31 is an act to add a new provision to referendum titles by amending subsection 17-106 of Article 1, Chapter 17, Title 3, Guam Code annotated. Madam Speaker, the people of Guam have the right to exercise their power to introduce referendum and initiative measures dealing with legislative matters. When proponents of an issue put forth a referendum or initiative measure for consideration by the voters of Guam, each measure is given a general title based upon the order they were proposed. For example, Proposal A or Proposition A. These titles become heavily advertised and are used in campaign process so as to become easily recognizable by voters, so that they are strongly encouraged to either vote for or against it. Because these titles become recycled in following elections, there is a need to differentiate between a referendum issue currently before the voter in the particular year and not have it confused with the subject matter or stigma of a prior referendum issue with a similar designation or title. What makes this necessary is that the prior designations for a referendum measure, such as, for example, Proposition A, an act to legalize gambling, may have an inadvertent association in the ensuing debate for a completely different issue in a future referendum in a succeeding year, Madam Speaker. I want to ensure to the extent possible that future referendum measures are examined in their own light and are not inadvertently associated, influenced, tainted, or bolstered by past referendum measures. I believe that we can address this quite simply by adding the last two digits of the election year in which the vote is to be decided, followed by the alphabet letter corresponding to the order in which it was submitted to the Election Commission, followed by the title. This way, voters will be able to make an informed decision based upon concise and distinguished titles that will only be associated with the current subject for which it's named. And so I ask my colleagues for their favorable consideration of this legislation, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody wishing to speak on the motion? If not, Senator Dennis, can you bring it up on the motion to bring it to the voting file?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place 252-31 to the voting file.
Without any objection, motion carries. We are now on Bill number 256. Vice Speaker Cruz, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This is the last of my H2 alien labor pieces of legislation. And this one and I'd like to move Substitute Bill 256-31 as substituted by the Committee on Youth, Cultural Affairs, Procurement, General Governmental Operations, and Public Broadcasting to the third reading file and ask for a short opportunity to
Please
speak.
proceed, Vice Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have been on this, I guess some people think it's a campaign or some kind of crusade about the H2 laborers, because I really am concerned about the high unemployment rate on this island, the 13.3, and who it is and why they're getting cooks, landscapers, and all kinds of interesting applicants for the position. And so this new section, this substitute bill adds a new section 10313 to Chapter 3 of Title 5 of the Guam Code Annotated to require that within 6 calendar months of the enactment of this law that the Department of Labor will have to publish on its website on a quarterly basis all temporary labor certifications issued and enacted pursuant to the governor's approval. And that would be, the reason I'm asking for this, Madam Speaker, is I had to FOIA the first 3 months of this year of approved applications. And when I did that, I found all kinds of interesting applications from people that were applying for landscapers and requiring a high school diploma, requiring that they be able to drive a bobcat, some excavators, and some other things, and paying them $8 an hour. And that's a heavy equipment operator, but that was the way that they were going to be able to bring in 13 landscapers and pay them this, just above $8 an hour. Of course, nobody locally was going to apply. I also was able to see that there were applications for engineers that were being sought and had been approved. But 3 local engineers had applied for the position, and their names were on it after I made the FOIA request, but they didn't take it because the salary was too low. And so I'm just looking to try to see what the problems are. There was one for a position that had 18 applicants locally that applied for it. And they were allowed to bring in an H2 laborer because for some reason they couldn't contact or recontact any of the 18 people that had applied for the position, or for some reason could not justify giving them the position because they write the things in such a way that it's virtually impossible for anybody to want to take that position. So I just like it to be transparent and be on the website and have who's applying for it and how many people have applied for those positions and why they weren't selected, because I'd like to be able to know that without having to FOIA every other month Department of Labor, so I can follow what they're doing and making sure that our people who are unemployed can somehow have a fighting chance to be employed and regain their dignity with a decent paying job, Madam Speaker. So I ask my colleagues for their support in this one. It's just in the interest that we've all been moving forward throughout this term in transparency and having things up on the website so we know exactly what everybody's doing in the government agencies. So I thank you very much for this opportunity and hope that I get the support of my colleagues.
Si Zeus Masi, Vice Speaker, are there anyone else wishing to speak on the motion? If not, Vice Speaker, can I have you make a correction on the title before you move it down to the voting file? Would that be an act to add? No, on the main title. Wouldn't it be an act to add?
And that, yeah, I'm sorry, an act to add.
On that motion, are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. Oh, technical. Okay. Thank you. Can you move it?
Move it to the to voting file. Thank you.
Without any objections? Motion carries. Thank you. And now we are finally at the last bill, Bill number 217-31. We'll take a 1-minute recess. Nice. Again, Senator Tom Atta, you're recognized on your Bill 217.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that Bill 217-31, as substituted by the Committee on Transportation, Utilities, Public Works, and Veterans Affairs, be placed in the third reading, and I'd like to briefly discuss the bill.
Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, this bill actually pertains to that Tizan Parkway that cuts from the airport across Tizan and out to Route 8. That particular two-lane highway or two-lane road right now actually accommodates about 14,000 vehicles daily. Now, several years ago, government of Guam agreed to close that Tizan Parkway right about where the runway, the part that runs north-south out towards Route 8, agreed that it would close that when FAA said that they wanted to invest millions of dollars to extend and make repairs for our runway. FAA, basically the airport, needs to shut down that road to provide the necessary protective zones for the flights that are coming in. And the agreement was that we would shut down that road really by June of 2013. Now, as it stands, one alternative is, of course, if we don't provide an alternate route, then in essence we're going to close off that road, and we're going to be putting 14,000 more vehicles out there on Route 1 and Route 8, and it's going to add to the congestion. And so we really need to maintain that Tizan Parkway. Now, the original plans are that that's supposed to be a 4-lane highway. Right now, the reality is that there's not enough money in our in the highway funds to be able to construct that road today. Even if we were ready to do that, we would have to go out and float what is called a Garvey bond, a government anticipated revenue bond, to draw down on the $18 million that we normally get annually from federal highway for the construction of our roads. However, there has been concession on the on this plan to build a Tizan Parkway, in that then the segment from where the Guam Police Department is right now is to have that road then pick up from there, go along the fence line and come out by the Cars Plus. And that then will be the new exit, as opposed to where it is now over there by McDonald's. And the funds for that would actually come from the Federal Highway Administration. They are willing to actually construct that road. But there are other things on the other side, on the eastern side of that route, that really requires GovGuam action and GovGuam revenues. So what this, and right now, of course, if we were to go with a 4-lane highway, it's going to require land condemnation and all that. I think the land to be acquired has been appraised anywhere between $8 to $12 million. Now, does GovGuam have the $8 to $12 million? Obviously not. Notwithstanding all that, we've got to put this issue on the table, and the administration has to deal with it. It is currently listed in the Transportation Improvement Plan. Those are projects that are slated to commence within the next 5 years. But, you know, if we don't come up with $12 million to acquire that private property, we're not going to be able to put in that 4-lane highway. Notwithstanding all that, we've got to put the issue on the table. The administration is going to have to sit down and dialogue and begin some serious dialogue with the federal counterparts, Federal Highway Administration, FAA, and try to convince them that, you know, at least until we are able to get the necessary funds to acquire the lands and be able to construct that 4-lane highway, we're going to have to continue with a 2-lane road in addition to constructing the new western part of that parkway. So what Bill 217 actually does is it basically directs the chief executive, the governor of Guam, to develop and transmit to the legislature a project plan of action and timeline of the critical project components for the Tizan Parkway. Now, on page 2, I would like to make some amendments here. The first amendment is on line 9, and that is, at the end of that line, it says, and timeline for the initiation of. Well, I want to delete the phrase for the initiation, such that what we really want from the administration is a project plan of action and timeline of the critical project components of the Tizan Parkway, and that he is to provide that within 90 days of enactment. So that's the first amendment that I would like to make.
On that amendment, clerks, do you have that? No objection?
The second amendment I would like
Motion
to make,
carries.
Madam Speaker, is on line 11. Starting on that sentence there that says, such plan shall include approximate commencement, I want to delete all that down to line 20th. So instead of being very prescriptive as to moving him or having him come up with a project plan which pushes him towards land condemnation, right-of-way acquisition, and all of that, that may not be the solution at this point. So that would really be an irrelevant part of the project plan. But otherwise, if there's other plans, if there's other actions that can be taken, then we want to know that. And that can only be achieved by actually then conducting some serious dialogue with the federal counterparts, and to do so within 90 days to give it some urgency. Urgency because that road is going to have to be closed when the airport is ready to open its runway about next summer. So I would ask my colleagues to please support this this bill so that we can get this dialogue started and moving towards resolving the Tizan Parkway issue. Thank you.
Buen provecho, Senator Ada. So on that motion to delete, starting on line 11, page 2, from the word such, all the way down to line 20 after procedures. On that motion, any objections? No objection, motion carries. Anyone else wishing to speak on the amendment or on the motion? If not, Senator Ada.
Madam Speaker, I just move to put Bill 217 down the voting file.
Without any objection? Motion carries. I will now recognize the Majority Leader. Senator Respicio, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I move that we revert back to motions.
On that motion, no objections. Motion carries.
Madam
Senator
Speaker,
Respicio.
my first motion is to place in the legislative concurrence file the appointment of Ms. Joanna Margaret Blas to the Parole Board. The good chairman of this committee just filed the committee report maybe a week ago. And as we know, the situation with the Parole Board is very critical that they get as many members as possible to be confirmed by this body so they can proceed. So I move that nomination in the legislative concurrence.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Senator Respicio.
Thank you. Another 3 pieces of legislation that I'd like to add to the second reading file are also time-sensitive matters. Resolution number 142-31, introduced by Speaker Wampad, Senator Tom Ada, and yourself, and it's relative to the Continental United merger. And this resolution has received a public hearing while we were in session, and so this is eligible for placement on the agenda.
On that motion, are there any objections?
Following that,
Motion carries.
my next motion is to place Bill 241-31, introduced by VC Penglinen, and it's an act to exempt maps of the Chamorro Land Trust lease sites previously approved by the Chamorro Land Trust Commission from the requirements of Article 2, Chapter 62 of the Guam Code Annotated relative to subdivision and recordation procedures. Yeah.
On that motion, are there any objections? Motion carries,
and-
Senator
Yeah,
Restitution.
and finally, Madam Speaker, is Bill 299-31, as substituted by the Committee on Youth, Cultural Affairs, Procurement, General Government Operations, and Public Broadcasting, introduced by myself, the Vice Speaker Cruz, and yourself, Senator Tina Muñoz Barnes, and it's relative to empowering the northern and southern Guam soil and water conservation districts.
That's 299-31 LS, right?
Yeah, as substituted.
As substituted. On that motion, are there any objections?
Can I
Motion
just
carries.
clarify, on Resolution 142, we have a substituted by the author, and then Bill 241, we have as amended by the Committee on Appropriation, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land. So let the record reflect, Madam Speaker, that these are the versions that we're adopting.
Will be on.
Okay.
So noted.
Yeah, thank you. And under
This one-
legislative concurrences, I move that the appointment of Joanne Margaret Blas be placed in the voting file.
Without any objection?
Then we
Motion
can now
carries.
proceed to second reading. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. Situas Masi, Majority Leader, we will now entertain Resolution 142-31, and I recognize Madam Speaker Wampat.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to place resolution number 142-31 in the third reading file, and I'd like to just briefly
As substituted?
discuss it. Yes, as substituted by the author.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Actually, to really understand what this whole bill is about, it's really in the title, and there have been changes made to the title, and I would just like to go ahead and share that with you. Resolution 142 is relative to voicing the concern of Legislature in Guahan on the proposed redeployment of the Guam-based Continental Micronesia flight attendants resulting from the recent merger of Continental and United Airlines, and to emphasize that the impact of such redeployment could seriously imperil flight attendants, CMI flight attendants' earning ability and the possibility of them having to relocate off-island when they've placed permanent roots on Guam, and to implore that the United Airlines needs to reaffirm its commitment to the CMI flight attendants and the people of Guam, CNMI, and Micronesia. United management should meet with the union leadership to review the plans to shift the Honolulu Guam and Narita Guam route, and should work with the Association of Flight Attendants to mitigate any income loss for CMI flight attendants until such time when the new United Airlines has achieved one single operating certificate and the flight attendants group has negotiated a single contract with a single seniority list. Mr. Speaker, several months ago, and you and many of our other colleagues were in my office when we met with several Continental Air Micronesia flight attendants about their concerns with this merger. As a result then of our discussions, Resolution 142 was introduced. 142. 142. What we had discovered was that the original union representative of IAM no longer represents the flight attendants. Now, when this first started, there was supposed to be an election, and as it turned out, the Continental Micronesian union representative did not win the representation, and so what had happened then was that it is now instead the union is the new union representative, which is called the Association of Flight Attendants, has been selected, and because of the numbers overall are far greater than the representation here in Guam. So that's the new representative, union representative for flight attendants. AFA International President Vida Shook had sent a letter to the Senior Vice President of the Labor Relations for the United Airlines, and they had requested for an immediate meeting to address these serious problems for the CMI AFA members, which is defined in the letter as, and I quote him, a real hit to their income and the inability for recall of their flying partners who have been working at Continental without their seniority. The letter also takes special care to talk about Guam and the relationships we have here with the local community. Prior then to the actual public hearing, I had also met with several of our business community members in those in the private sector, such as the Employers Council, GHRA, and GVB, who wanted to make some suggestions in the language of the resolution. And two things that they've actually had suggested, primarily because they said they didn't want the legislature to be involved in any type of union business or private sector business, but instead maybe to frame the language to talk about not only our flight attendants and what they've done for our community, but maybe to set an example for United Airlines to actually say that you can really learn from our flight attendants here in Guam, and that rather than just trying to redeploy them, that there's something very unique that's here in Guam with our flight attendants. And what that is that everyone throughout the public hearing has talked about is the half-a-day spirit. The second message that they were also concerned with is the neighboring islands and how they're going to be affected as well because of this redeployment. We had received many correspondence from several individuals. There was an official letter that came from the Congresswoman Berdalio had sent to Jeff Smisic requesting that the company address the concerns raised by the Guam-based flight attendants. There was a response letter, yes, from Mr. Jeff Smisic to Congresswoman Berdalio stating that the decision to bring the United 777 to Guam Honolulu and Guam Narita routes was designed to meet the needs of the market and assurances that the company will communicate with co-workers at our Guam base to address these concerns. There was a letter also from Michael Stowe, who is the customer and OnePass member, to Mr. Smisic, a letter from Cindy Hager, a customer, to Mr. Smisic, a letter from Gabriel Pareda, customer and presidential platinum member, to Mr. Jeff Smisic, a letter from Robert Roach Jr., the General Vice President, Association of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, to Mr. Doc McKean, who is the Senior Vice President, Labor Relations, United Airlines, a letter from Vida Shook, International President and the Association of Flight Attendants, to Doc McKean, and over 700 signatures obtained from flight attendants, personnel, customers, and others in support of Resolution 142 that were circulated. Mr. Speaker, one of the highlights of the public hearing was actually a visit by the Vice President from the International Vice President, Sarah Nelson, for the Association of Flight Attendants. And she provided oral testimony on Resolution 142. She had emphasized that AFA, they represent over 60,000 flight attendants around the world, and that this merger has to work also for the many flight attendants through the hard work of its employees and communities they serve. And she feels also very strongly that as flight attendants, because she herself is a flight attendants know their communities best and know their customers through the relationship that they've made with them. And CMI has created a brand that is trusted, loved, and respected by this community, which is a tremendous asset to the company that can't be forgotten. Mrs. Nelson also stressed that management has not responded to a May 2nd letter and have said that not one word at all about the CMI flight attendants about their decisions, nor have they been asked for any input or help so that they'll be able to have an understanding of what may happen. She is currently working, and through their unions, currently working with the management to find out how then, if this is going to be a good decision, and if doing what they say they want to do is going to grow and create better opportunities for the community. And she concluded, and I quote her, "This merger has to work for the employees and communities we serve first and foremost for it to be a success. Corporations are not just about the shareholders. They can only be a success with the lives and service from the people that work here. I've learned very clearly from being here less than 24 hours that the day truly starts in Guam, and that she's going to take that half-a-day spirit back with her and the spirit of all the dedicated people in Guam who hold to the people in Chicago to hold them accountable for their promises." Other members of the community in the private sector had testified, and the one clear message that really came out, which speaks actually to that half-a-day spirit, and if I may quote at least one businessman who is a platinum member for a very long time, and even through the changes in airline options and choices in airline travel, his response is that it isn't about the price, rather it's preference, and that he told the body that the CNMI flight attendants are like family to him and fully supports their efforts. His loyalty to Continental Airlines is through them, the employees. And he said that if you take them away, and there is no reason, then there is no reason for him not then to now fly Delta. And that the company United should understand what the impact will be as a result of this merger and displacement. Another heartwarming testimony came from one of our locals, and this we're seeing happening all the time. We just heard and discussed, deliberated on a bill that was introduced by Speaker Pangilinan that actually talks about mileage that can be used to assist our people in having to go off island for medical treatment. And one of our own locals here also had to take his father off island for medical, his mother, have to escort his mother off island to Hawaii for medical reasons. And it was through, again, the CMI flight attendants that this human touch is what really has made our flight attendants, the CMI flight attendants, stand out from all flight attendants, because even in the continuation of the Continental Airlines out of Honolulu to the rest of the continental U.S., that the flight attendants, even there, whether it's Continental or United, did not at all have the same respect and care and heartwarming, attitude in taking care of not just the locals, but all of the people of Guam who travel out of Guam. So, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the resolution And we gave you a copy where we have actually changed the language to try to make it, a lot more positive, and to send out that message of the Hafaday spirit. So throughout, then the language where you've seen, and then besides that, we've updated it because some of the individuals that were being addressed here have actually changed, and any new developments in the negotiation or even in the election has been now incorporated into the resolution. And the last of all, in terms of why we're doing this, and that would be our resolved clause, is that we here are saying the legislature and the people of Guam does hereby oppose the proposed redeployment of the Guam-based Continental Micronesia flight attendants resulting from the recent merger. We're saying we resolve that the Continental Airlines, that they would need to reaffirm its commitment to Guam, the Guam-based flight attendants and the people of Guam, who have for decades enjoyed the exceptional service, local appeal, and the Hafaday spirit, and the charm that Continental Micronesia flight attendants provide through the Honolulu, Guam, and the Narita, Guam route services. And also resolve that the CMI continue to fly the Honolulu, Guam, Narita route until such time when the new United Airlines has achieved one single operating certificate and the flight attendants group has negotiated a single contract with a single seniority listing. And that also we're requesting that the United Management schedule a meeting as soon as possible to discuss then means to mitigate any temporary impact on income and other considerations for flight attendants if indeed the redeployment makes sense for the long-term benefit of United Airlines service in Guam. And we've updated also the individuals in which we want to send copies of this to the airlines, to those also in Chicago, the airlines in Chicago where management is, the Congresswoman, Assistant Secretary Tony Babauta, the Vice President for in-flight service, all of those individuals. And I think maybe for the listening audience, those who are wondering what is really going on here is that there will be a replacement of the current air carrier that's currently carrying our passengers will be now switched off to a larger carrier, which they call the Boeing 777-777, and that they'll be able to carry an additional 90 some more travelers. The problem is, our understanding is that this is an older aircraft. It is also it also has the old one screen movie screen. And then, of course, it's a manual recliner. The seats are smaller, and that these are not normally designed for 7.5-hour flights, but rather a 4-hour flight. So they're very uncomfortable. And I think it's, although we understand that they want to be able to put more travelers in it, make more money, but it's surely not at the comfort of those of us out here who have no choice but to fly out for 7.5 hours to the mainland. And if we're going to go the other way, although there may be 4-hour flights with a layover and then another 7 hours to get ourselves into Honolulu, or of course the 12-hour flights, which are longer. So I'm asking that we of course support this. I ask for favorable consideration so that we can quickly send this resolution off island. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Secretary Munya Barnes.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Vice Speaker, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to rise and speak in support of Resolution 142-31 as introduced by the good Speaker, Speaker Juan Pat from Malolo. Mr. Speaker, I just want to note as the previous speaker, Speaker Wampat, talked about the attempt and talked about how this resolution was updated and brought up the concerns about the possible redeployment of our continental Micronesia based flight attendants, which will, I believe in my heart, will literally pose serious harm to our community in as far as this employment-based company. I say that, Mr. Speaker, because continental Micronesia here on Guam, if I'm not mistaken, has over 1,000 employees that are Guam-based. And in that, these flight attendants came from, and as noted by the good retiring speaker, she spoke about them not really trying to get government involved in this. But Mr. Speaker, if you know that potential harm could be done to a group of community residents here on Guam, a large group of community residents here on Guam, and we're not talking 20, we're not talking 100, we're not talking 500, we're talking possibly, the flight attendants came here, but we're possibly talking, if this negotiation doesn't get done, that an impact could seriously affect a total economic base of employees working here. And if I'm not mistaken, CMI is at over 1,000 employees strong. The reason why I bring that up, Mr. Speaker, is because I just heard recently that several other employees within the CMI, the Continental Micronesia company, several employees from the different division, which was ramp and cargo, it has come to my attention that they received their furlough notices and notices of major change, hampering and possibly causing grave concern to the employees there without having fair mitigation. Mr. Speaker, I stand in full support, as the good author of the legislation spoke about emphasizing the kind of half-a-day spirit that is instilled in the continental flight attendants from our island, sharing that to the flights that they share within this Asia Pacific and to the United States. I know that if we voice our concerns loud enough and hard enough and show these employees that we as policymakers are just as concerned as they are, that they would be rest assured that their concerns are not going unanswered. And sometimes you need that little big push, Mr. Speaker, to show that we here have worked not just real hard, but decades on making this airline a very, very important icon for the people in the Pacific. And because of their commitment, because of their belief in what they were doing and who they were working for, it is important that we help in the concern, knowing that they may be out of a position or may be redeployed on something that they took so many years to grow, to commit to serve, and to provide. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand in full support of this resolution. I want to thank the good speaker, Wampat, for giving me the opportunity to be a part of her co-sponsorship. But I also want the Continental Micronesia flight attendants to know that we are here, we are listening, and we feel for them. Because, Mr. Speaker, if the effects that they believe may happen to them, the harmful effects that they feel and believe in their heart that will happen to them, believe me, it'll have a greater impact on what we would have to do to provide for services if those folks lose their jobs. And I hope and pray that people out there are listening, and I hope and pray that these flight attendants, these workers, and also for the other divisions within the Continental Micronesia Company, that we hope that their concerns and their issues will also be addressed, and that we hope that they can keep their jobs. Because, Mr. Speaker, they've been there for many, many decades. I know that there are some employees who have over 30 years of company service to Continental Micronesia, and it would be a shame to see them leave or to see them go. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of this resolution, and I ask that my colleagues support the same.
Any other senator wish to speak on the resolution? Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just didn't want to sit idly by and not create an opportunity for me to rise in support of this resolution, and really to commend the authors of this resolution to have been able to do this despite what some may question as to whether or not the legislature has any role in the upcoming merger between Continental and United Airlines. You know, I think that the way the Speaker has handled this issue and how this resolution was substituted by her and others just goes to show, Mr. Speaker, that when we stand behind an issue that we want to bring forth to the community, and having heard from various sectors of the community, it's always possible to come out with an outcome that really represents what both sides may want to see as a result of what issue is we want to put forward. And this resolution 142, you know, I had an opportunity to spend some time at the public hearing that we had, and I just wanted to express to those employees that came forward, express how courageous they are to come forward and express their fears, their anxieties, their hopes with respect to the upcoming merger. And I want to say that I have yet to hear any one of those flight attendants badmouth or put down their future employer. I think if anything, they just want to get the legislature's attention to have Continental and United Airlines recognize that they're perhaps the largest employer here on Guam, and we want to acknowledge them for everything they've done to help us with our economy, and their successes ought to be congratulated. But it's the same successes, Mr. Speaker, where I, as a member of the legislature, and several others have often wondered, why is it that when you look at the Guam-Honolulu route and how much our people are charged for these routes versus what other airlines charge for the same destination, we always are charged more. We've always are charged more, and it's this leg, Mr. Speaker. If you look at Continental Micronesia's successes versus the parent company, Continental Airlines, before they've merged, it's the Continental Micronesia Corporation that's realized startling profits versus the parent company where they've received losses. And so, you know, our community, we've done a lot also to support this airline. And one of the things I rise to be concerned about is, as a result of this merger, they're going to be giving us older fleets, the 777 models, where I'm not sure people would want to accept that kind of an airline. I mean, I know that the management of Continental and United have expressed that when we bring Guam the bigger airlines, we increase the capacity for cargo, we increase the passenger capacity, and in doing so, we would also help with our tourism and also in furtherance of that, it also helps our economy. But at what price, Mr. Speaker? I'm not sure if these flights can have a 100% passenger rate. If it's the case, and I'm certainly looking forward to that. But if it's not the case, then I ask, why do they have to subject the people of Guam to that kind of airline under those kinds of conditions? Because if they're a loyal Continental employee, I'm sure they would continue to fly Continental despite the merger because of the rewards program. But there are other airlines here on Guam that service the Guam route, and that's something that Continental and United have to be very cognizant of. They have to be aware that this resolution expresses some deep concern that if our local based flight attendants are taken out of this route, and they bring flight attendants from other areas, then those income taxes will be paid to those areas where those flight attendants live. And so if they take Houston-based flight attendants under United and have them service the Guam route and displace our Guam-based flight attendants, those income taxes are going to be paid to Houston and not to Guam or wherever jurisdiction they're filing taxes in. So when people start to ask, why is it that the legislature is now getting involved in commerce and this idea of support for free enterprise, I think when we express it in that manner and to say not only are you displacing your flight attendants that have given 20, 25 years of loyal service to that company, and it's beyond loyal service, Mr. Speaker. I mean, all of us who fly Continental, even if we find ourselves in economy, we always get the same kind of treatment that others would get if they're in business first or first class passengers. They always say, half a day, how are you? They would bring back the newspaper. Sometimes I don't want to read the newspaper on my way back from a trip because I want my peace of mind to carry all the way until we land on Guam. But so they offer a newspaper, that's fine, I'll take it, I'll read it. But it's just that kind of environment. They know who the local people are. They know how important culturally it is to have those kinds of relationships. And I'm not sure if that same half-a-day spirit will continue if they rotate out these flight attendants. So I think what we're expressing here by sending this resolution is we're asking the new company to recognize that it's not always about the bottom line, and it should not always be about profit. Profit at what expense? And when you start to have your focus just on the bottom line, and you start to take away those things that mean so much to most of us here on the island, that personal connection, that half a day, how are you? And then when you land on Guam, they tell you you've landed at the A.B. Wampat International Airport. They give some kind of a Chamorro greeting. If those are the things that are going to keep people loyal to this airline, then they will always realize their profits. But if they want to start changing things and doing drastic measures like giving us the older planes and treating us like we're just going to be sardines packed, and just because we just want to bring more people in and more people out. Again, if that's the case, I pray to God that's the case. But if those flights are not coming in at 100% capacity, then why do we get stuck with those older model planes? And I have yet to get some assurances from anyone, whether from Continental Micronesia or from United, as to why we're not going to get access to the newer planes. And if you fly other routes, you see the 767s and how nice they are. Even in economy seats, Mr. Speaker, they're just, you could tell the newer planes are much nicer. Even the in-flight entertainment systems are much nicer than now to have to fly a 777, if we're to still remain flying with Continental, I think that whole flying experience would just change, and it'll be exacerbated if we no longer have these loyal local flight-based flight attendants. And so I rise in support of the resolution. I hope that United Airlines sees this as something positive, that their legislature is concerned about the tax base that we may be losing, and they would reconsider for the reasons expressed in this resolution, but also reconsider because they need to follow through with the Continental Micronesians' own commitment to this community. And they've been wonderful corporate citizens. Continental Micronesia has been a wonderful corporate citizen, and I pray that under this merger, United Airlines will continue that kind of philosophy. And so I thank you for the opportunity, and I presented this right under my time limit. Thank you. A little bit over my time limit. You gave me more time? I didn't think so.
I'm not giving time. But thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on the resolution? Madam Speaker, you recognize to close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to thank, of course, our colleagues and to thank the previous speaker for actually addressing that issue about whether the legislature should be involved in, the private enterprise. But this one is really very different, and the business community has come out as well to say just that, and they're speaking on a personal level. So I would like then to ask that to have resolution 142 then sent down to the voting file.
Any objection to moving the resolution down? Hearing none. Bill 241.
This must.
241, yes.
Yes, 241. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move Bill 241-31 COR as amended by the Committee on Appropriation, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land be placed in third reading. I'd like to discuss it very briefly.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bill 241 would complete a process that has been put in limbo because of a inability of land management and the Chamorro Land Trust to work out some kind of functional agreement with regards to the recordation of Chamorro Land Trust property leases. At one time, it was accepted by land management that maps that reflected the metes and bounds of Chamorro Land Trust property and lease awarded to recipients would be accepted by the Department of Land Management. Land Management subsequently then reversed its position on some issues and required that unless the subdivision of those lots were approved by the Guam Land Use Commission, that they would not accept recording these maps, which now left maps developed by licensed surveyors reflecting the metes and bounds of individual leases in these subdivisions would not be recorded, which then prevented Chamorro Land Trust recipients from moving forward on development of property, financing of homes, and things of that nature, because you need a recorded map in order to do that. Now, this would, and again, this bill would allow those maps that had been approved by the Chamorro Land Trust Commission that were prepared by licensed engineers, licensed surveyors, to be recorded, accepted and be recorded at the Department of Land Management without having to go back and go through the Guam Land Use Commission for the approval of those subdivisions. So those maps that had those prior approvals by the Commission itself and the MOU between the Commission and Land Management would now be accepted and recorded by Land Management. Any future maps to be prepared for subdivisions of Chamorro Land Trust property would then be required to go through the Guam Land Use Commission review process and acceptance. And this would help those landowners that are in limbo right now with maps prepared by licensed surveyors from just being out there to now finalizing them, recording them, and they can move forward on the development of their leases that have been awarded to them. So that, Mr. Speaker, is in real brief synopsis of the intent and the operation of this bill, and I ask for the body's consideration and support. And I'd like to move it to third reading.
Any other senator wish to be heard on the bill? 241. Madam Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just have a question. I'm trying to get a better understanding here. Because I understand maps, and are these like official maps that was done by a surveyor versus when it says here property sketches? Because I'm just thinking that sketches are not formal, but maps are. And then the other question too is that because if you can give us a little more information in terms where it says that they would be sent back, so that then they would have to kind of divide up the maps into like 4, 6 partials. Can you explain to me a little bit more about what that means? Well, do the sketches first, and let me find that specific sections because.
Yes, we wanted to distinguish, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for that question. We wanted to distinguish between sketches and maps. In the very beginning, sometimes Chamorro Land Trust property identified lots for leases by sketches of their either technical staff or else surveyors. Now, those sketches are not covered under the approval process here. Those sketches were then subsequently required by Chamorro Land Trust to be verified basically or redrawn by licensed surveyors with field work that verified those meets and bounds. So it is only those maps that that have been prepared by the licensed surveyors, signed by the licensed surveyors, that would be eligible for recordation and acceptance under this statute. And those sketches that reflected basically the size of the lots and so forth are not would not be eligible to be recorded and accepted by the Department of Land Management.
And the second one actually is on page then 2, line 8, and where it says for properties subdivided into 6 or more lots.
Yes, that's what happened is these maps were individual maps of subdivisions. And so the reason why land management was not accepting these individual maps of these subdivisions is that the Guam the land management statutes require that all subdivisions of 6 or more lots need to be approved by the Guam Land Use Commission. So though that did not happen because that was waived in a memorandum of understanding between the Chamorro Land Trust and Land Management in the past, and they accepted the Chamorro Land Trust subdivisions without first having to go through the Guam Land Use Commission. So only those maps from now backwards would not be required to be approved by the Guam Land Use Commission. Going forward, all subdivision maps by the Chamorro Land Trust of 6 or more lots, which is the definition of the subdivision, would need to first be approved by the Guam Land Use Commission before those maps can be approved.
Is that sufficient, Madam Speaker? Do you wish to speak on the main bill? Anybody wish to speak on the bill? You may close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, once again, what has been created here is a land in limbo of these Chamorro Land Trust lessees who have maps prepared by licensed surveyors that have gotten caught up in the approval process because the original agreement and the original approval process did not include the Guam Land Use Commission. So this would put those maps as official maps eligible for registration and recordation so that these lessees can move forward in the development of their properties. And then moving forward, we would require the subdivision maps to have prior approval of the Guam Land Use Commission before they can be sent.
So on the motion to place Bill 241 in the voting file, any objection? Hearing none. Bill 299, Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill 299-31 be placed in the voting file. And I have just a very brief explanation.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. Speaker, Bill 299 really is kind of a thorough rework of the soil and water conservation districts. It's a project that we started back in February of this year. And I rise to, as I present this, I rise to publicly recognize a member of my staff, Stephanie Mendiola, who really should be at law school right now. Worked closely with a member of your staff, Mr. Joshua Tenorio, who should have been finished with law school by now. But I know those plans change. But the drafting of Bill 299 involved a holistic review of the enabling legislation, and work was done with both districts and the University of Guam to craft a better organized chapter reflecting more current needs and practices. And the chapters were reorganized so that various sections that are scattered throughout the current law are proposed to be better categorized in the proposed breakdown. The district boards are empowered by changing their status as a subdivision under UOG, and a new section was added to address consistent absences of district directors. And a new section has been added to expand the ability for the boards to hire personnel to carry out their mission and mandates. And a lot of this, the genesis of this, Mr. Speaker, really is a result of what I was involved in the 27th Guam Legislature, where that legislature, for justified reasons at the time, we moved the soil and water district boards from the Department of Agriculture to the University of Guam, because at the time the members said that they weren't getting really enough support from agriculture as a line agency, because whatever monies were appropriated to it, it never trickled down to them. So they suggested that maybe if we were to house them under the University of Guam, UOG would be able to provide better services. And granted, UOG has been able to provide better services for them, Mr. Speaker, but the way the law reads, it reads that they're a subdivision of the University of Guam and they're subordinate to UOG. And as a result, they've been subjected to UOG's hiring practices. They've been subjected to UOG's travel policy. And when you subject members who have been elected in their own right to the travel policy of, let's say, University of Guam employee, there's already a disparity. And so what we wanted to do, and I want to recognize you and your help, because this really involves a type of reorganization before us. What we wanted to do is to find a way to meaningfully empower these district board members, and we believe that Bill 299 as presented is a way to do that. And based on that public hearing that we had, we further substituted this bill to require for a quarterly financial report that was changed to the requirement for an annual report, and the change was requested during the public hearing for the reason that the annual appropriations for the districts is less than $80,000, so an annual report would be more practical, and that's what they've asked. The second thing that we thought of, Mr. Speaker, is to just simply allow them to manage the funds that they get. It's about $100,000, $80,000, and that we established a fund for each district to allow them to manage their own accounts, which are still appropriated to the University of Guam. And this is something that we do for gain. It's something that we've done for the Guam Board of Accountancy. And so I think that if doing it this way, whatever monies that are provided to this district, by not having to go and be subordinate to the University of Guam, we also get away from UOG having to charge an administrative fee for the day-to-day administration of this soil and water conservation district. So I thank you for the opportunity to present. I thank members for the opportunity to allow me to put this on the agenda, because certainly it is time sensitive. We'd like this to be implemented on October 1st to coincide with the start of the upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you. Any other senator wish to speak on Bill 299? On the motion to send Bill 299 to the voting file, hearing no objection. Okay, we also have a problem. Can you, the legislative concurrence, there are 3 that need to be moved down.
Yeah, you're right. No, I did. When we went to the just to be doubly sure. Yeah. So notwithstanding the House rules, I move that we revert back to legislative concurrence.
Hearing no objection.
Yeah, I believe I made this motion to place Joanna Margaret Blas to the voting file. Third reading? No, this is the
No,
voting
there were
file.
3 others on the.
Oh yeah. And the 3 others, and the clerk can read their name. You're correct. Yeah. So on that, for those names, I move that they be also placed in the voting file. Correct.
Any objection?
Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Did you want to make the motion as to when we recess till, Mr. Majority Leader?
Yeah, so, Mr. Speaker, having exhausted everything on the agenda, and to give the legal counsel and the clerk and our central staff some time to engross these bills, I move that we recess until Monday at 2 p.m., at which time we should be able to vote.
I think so the the listening public understands how many we have to move down. How many bills did we pass? 49 bills. 50.
Including a budget bill and a bond bill. And 3 special session bills.
All right, thank
that's
you.
why-
So we're in recess until 2 o'clock on Monday. Thank you.